live in Tunisia and I speak English.
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 Multiply Tunisia's goal is to capture the entrepreneurial spirit of Tunisia by highlighting the influencers in its startup, social innovation, and artistic communities. We're also interested in tracking the growing impact of English on these sectors and the effects that this will have on Tunisian culture.
We've had so much fun creating content for our I Speak English series, and we hope that you've enjoyed hearing perspectives about Tunisia from unique Tunisian voices. As we bring this season to a close, we thought it would be cool to hear a bit more from one of the season's contributors who made I Speak English possible. Fladwell Rawinji was with us every step of the way, collecting videos, pictures, helping to ensure that the content we produced was reflective of the creative environment of Tunisia. We invited Fladwell to the station to get his observation on some of the topics that were addressed in I Speak English. So we're here at the station with Fladwell Rawinji. Fladwell, thank you for coming down. And why don't you just introduce yourself to us? Who is Fladwell Rawinji?
Thank you very much, Nick, for having me at the station for this episode. My name is Fladwell Rawinji. I'm a Kenyan illustrator and designer, currently based in Tunisia. I've been here for about 2 years now. I basically do a bit of consultancy work with a studio I started last year, creative studio called Rawinji Studio, a studio that works with change makers, particularly in Africa. Most of our clients currently are in Kenya, to create and communicate social change through visual storytelling and design. So that's pretty much who I am. I think there's probably more we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, actually, there's quite a lot we can discuss. I know you kind of got a little side project going on here. Can you talk to us a little bit about this project that's called Jenge Culture?
Yeah, thank you so much. So there's this, so coming to Tunisia last, back in 2019, and interacting with Tunisians a little bit, I was able to get a bit of perspective about the other side of Africa, particularly North Africa, and I kept asking myself, so there are different persuasions that people have about their society, about development in Africa, and there's a lot to share as Africans. So could we come up with an initiative to bring us all together as Africans? And I know I'm an artist, I know I'm a designer, and I have a passion for social change in Africa. And so Jenge Culture is an initiative that we came up with in Rawinji Studio to bring that to fore. Jenge in itself is a word coming from the Swahili word tujenge, which is a word that means let us build. And the idea is, can we work together as Africans? So it's basically a Pan-African initiative. Can we work together as Africans through our creativity, through innovation, to spur social change and to build a new Africa, new perspective of Africa, and to really spur development across the continent.
That's a word you used there, Pan-Africa. That's a word that we've come across many times in our interviews with I Speak English. Many of the young Tunisians that we interviewed used that word, Pan-Africa. Can you explain that word a little bit? Unpack Pan-Africanism for us a little bit?
So Pan-Africanism is a concept that has existed for a very long time. I think especially from the people we refer to as the founders of Africa, especially those, the first leaders of the African continent who believed in the concept of Africa being united, the way you have United States of America. And so Africa being united and really having that mentality of Africa sharing not just a geographical space or continent, but also sharing in terms of the challenge that we have as a continent, and sharing in the future that we can be able to build together. And so it's a concept of unity, togetherness. It's a concept of continuous development as an African community. Both the peoples and the governments working together to be able to build a new Africa. So it's an interesting concept, and there's a lot about it. I know I may not be able to share about that today, but so that's really the concept underscoring Jenge culture.
If you were to do a study on Africa, you would find that Africa, as a continent, as peoples, as tribes, they speak over 4,000 different languages. They are present on this continent. And I see one barrier to achieving Pan-Africanism is that language barrier. Can you speak a little bit to some of the linguistic challenges that you had as a Kenyan arriving and working and setting up shop here in Tunisia?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So back in Kenya, we have, you've said about 4,000 or probably more. Back in Kenya, we have 42 different languages or tribes, and those are very many. And some of those tribes are related to each other, so they can kind of understand each other when they speak their own languages. And so speaking just from the Kenyan perspective, if I am a Luo and I speak to, which is one of the tribes in Kenya, and I speak to someone else who is a Kikuyu, which is a different tribe, we may not be able to understand each other. But I think one of the symbols of national unity, even written in our constitution, is the national language. And so in Kenya, we have two national languages, which is English and Swahili, which is a great uniting factor, all right? And so looking at things from that perspective, we are able to hear each other and communicate with each other in Swahili or in English. And that means that we're able to cooperate with each other, we're able to build, a community. Coming to Tunisia, especially coming from an English-speaking country, Kenya, I think that was one of the challenges I had coming into Tunisia, because Tunisia being predominantly Arabic or Tunsi and French speaking. In the initial couple of weeks of my time here, I wasn't able to get much English-speaking people. And so that was a big challenge. And when you cannot communicate, it's very difficult to do anything with anyone. It's difficult to build communities. It's difficult to connect with people. And so I think language as an element of communication is very, very important. And I think even as we were working together earlier about this whole project on I Speak English, I think that's one of the reflections I was having about the importance of communication, the importance of language, inspiring development, inspiring social change, inspiring cooperation between communities, between people. So I think from my perspective of Kenya and Africa, I think there's need for a unifying language or communication mechanism for us. And I'm not sure whether it's going to be an African language. There has been talk about making Swahili that language.
That would be pretty cool. I think we would both like that, wouldn't we?
I would love that. I would love that. But I think looking at it also from the perspective of connecting with the rest of the world, there's need to also consider other, globally spoken languages. Talk of English, French, especially in West Africa, that's very much spoken in that part of the world, in that part of Africa.
I think that's a similar vibe that we're catching from the young people of Tunisia, is that they are wanting to express who they are, which is bound up in French, it's bound up in Derja, it's bound up in their Arabic identity. But I think they're beginning to realize, and that's what we have from I Speak English, that there's a way that they can express themselves in English, but still maintain that identity of their roots, what their roots are.
Yeah.
And as we did this I Speak English, that's something that came to me, and how it's actually quite fun. I have one more question, and talking maybe about your perspective as the future. Do you feel that the future of Tunisia will be connected with English as well, from your perspective?
So that's an interesting question. So I haven't lived here long enough to be able to answer that question with authority. However, I think it's something that I would encourage, because I think I've spoken to many Tunisians, especially being here for now 2 years. There are many younger Tunisians, and this is something also observed from I Speak English. Even my coming, to connect with you as Nick came from my listening to your MultiplyTunisia podcast, and really getting to understand that actually there are Tunisians who speak English, and that was a great realization. And the more Tunisians that can speak English, I think the more they are able to open themselves to a bigger, part of the world, because English is spoken in many parts of the world. I mean, it's among the leading languages globally, and so I would say that the role of English in Tunisia is not quite about changing the culture of Tunisia. I think it's a skill, because the fact that I can speak English doesn't mean I'm less African. Doesn't mean I'm less Luo. All right. It's a skill I need to build, and I'm glad that many Tunisians are opening up to this, and they're learning English, they're learning French, they're learning Italian, they're learning Spanish. These are necessary skills to be able to connect with the rest of the world. And so if Tunisia is to grow as a country, as a society, I think there's need to connect more with English, to learn for its children, for its young people, to learn the language, because that's the language spoken mostly in business, in technology, etc., and in different spheres of development. And I think if Tunisia is to really get into that extra age of development, I think that would be very, very helpful for them. Yeah.
And do you find that, from your perspective, that Tunisia has a positive future ahead of it?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I've seen incredible talent in Tunisia. And so I think there's great potential here. And I think this potential needs to be seen by the rest of the world. I think this potential needs to be experienced by the rest of the world. And I think oftentimes that disconnect, that language disconnect, communication disconnect may be the challenge. And so if more and more of these artists, these entrepreneurs are able to speak a language that many people in the rest of the world can be able to speak, I think that connection is going to get them out there. And so there's a great future for Tunisia. I believe so. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to relate with it, even as I work from here. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for involving Rawinji Studio in this project.
Multiply Tunisia is brought to you by 11 Talents. At 11 Talents, we consult, design, and multiply. Find out more by following us on our Facebook page, our Instagram feed, or by visiting our website at 11talents.com. At 11 Talents, we start with you.